Hello there, Mike at Britannia Motorcycles here with our BSA trials bike build. As you can see, we're back at the dirty end of the workshop. Engine's all stripped and I'm just waiting for a couple of parts to arrive for that, and then we will rebuild it. So in the meantime, I'm going to make the alloy oil tank for this. So here it is, in situ. Part of the reason I like this is it acts as a complete guard for the pod air filter that I use. Once the top is on there, you know, there's rain, whatever, nothing's going to come down from the sides, from the underneath. It's very well covered. It's mounted underneath and it's mounted with two fixtures at the front. I'll show you all of those as we go along. The other thing I've just got, of course, is we take our air filter off. Here's somewhere to fill it, and as you'll see here, there's a breather pipe on the top. What we're going to do on this one, the next one actually, is making the breather pipe can be a bit of a chew. So I'm going to make the neck taller because we've got plenty of room under here, and I'm going to put the breather pipe in the side of the neck. The top actually I just has an O-ring on. I just took the O-ring off to run down to my local parts store and get some more O-rings. But this fits in, there's a groove and an O-ring, so when that's in, it's nice and tight. Nail top. So we're not going to have this piece on the top, so it's going to be a flat top, and we're going to have the breather pipe, as I said, coming out the side of here. We're also going to make it slightly bigger. It's going to come back here a little bit. I'm aiming for over a litre. That's just over a quart here in the US. That's ample for this motor in trials, because you know we're not going to be starting it up and running it at even high revs on the road for an hour's run or 2 hours run or whatever, or even just back and forwards to work. It's going to start up, we're going to ride it to a section, we're going to switch it off, we're going to ride the section, we're going to switch it off again to look at the next section, we're going to stop and gossip and all the rest of it. So a quart is going to be quite ample. It's actually going to work out to be a little bit more than that, and when we get to the point I'll show you how to measure the capacity of the tank you're building. We've put the mudguard in because we need to know how much space we've actually got to play with, and then what we start to do is we begin to measure up. And actually in this mudguard it's going to go in 2 or 3 different directions. It's wider at the bottom here than it is at the top where we're going to put it in, and we're also going to slope it a little bit going backwards. We're going to try and put the curve in of this also, and we're going to have the air filter, so we've got a number of things we have to bear in mind. Probably far more complicated than we need to make it, but as I say, it fits in nicely and it holds as much as we want. So the first thing you've got to do is take all your measurements and make yourself some drawings. So we have the front, as I say, it's wider at the bottom than it is at the top. Then the bottom, which is this width, this width at the bottom, and then going slightly wider as it goes out because we have more space. The top, of course, is different width again, and then the sides, actually, the two sides are going to be the same size, so we can just measure them. We've also got a couple of minor things to do as we build it up, but we'll come along to those. So I always find with anything as complicated as this, it's much easier to make it in pieces. You know, some things you can just simply mark it out on your piece of cardboard using all the necessary measurements and angles, just maybe put a center line through so you can get all your measurements correct, and then fold it up, you know, nice little piece of origami. And those of you who are watching, if any of you watching are sheet metal workers, you could knock this together in no time at all. But I'm not. So what I've done is, as you know, I like Blue Peter, so here is one I made earlier. The bottom and front are reasonably simple, so I made that marked out in one piece, and as I say, because it's different widths, I put a central line in, and then I was able to measure across at the various points, and you don't have to worry about protractors and drawing angles and things like that. So there's our first piece. It's going to go in. It's going to sit on the mounting for the mud guard, and that's, as you may remember, I drilled through, or maybe I even forgot to tell you, but it's drilled through for a bottom mount for here. So that's going to go in like that. Then when we've got it finished, there will be two mountings here. Then the next thing we have to do is make up a top. So we cut that out and we're going to tape it up. You'll notice the green tape. I've had a little trial run of this so I don't look like a complete idiot when I film it. And then we'll make up two sides and they will be put in as well. So let's start taping this together. And because the mud guard's in, we're not actually going to be able to put it in all completed. So we're going to have to take the mud guard out. But first of all, I'm going to show you this made, and we're going to measure the volume of it. You could measure it with some very clever geometry, but I'm going to show you a nice simple way, because it's no good making this wonderfully shaped oil tank and everything fits and all the rest of it, and you make it and find it only holds 700cc, or pint and a half. So let's get on to actually putting this little jigsaw together, and then we will measure the volume. Now, although my mental arithmetic is pretty good, I could never get the hang of algebra or geometry. So instead of making all sorts of rectangles and triangles, and because there's so many, as you can see, it's all just a really weird shape, I had to come up with a way to measure this. And what you need is one nice floppy plastic bag. It's got to be really thin, and of course no holes in it. So these shopping bags work. Here's another one for our older viewers. Do you remember the brown paper carrier bags with string handles? I do. Anyway, we put that in there. It'll behave itself. And we're going to just prop it up a little bit because everything's at an angle. Then you need a measuring cylinder of some description and some water. And put it around the right way. We're not going to do a pre-mix. There we go. So just like being back in the lab. There we go. There's 500 mils. And the reason you use the thin plastic is so that it will form itself to the shape. So as I say, that's 500. Turn this thing the right way, Michael. Come on, you Wally. So there's our litre. There's another 500 mils, and we've still got space all the way around. So, we're not wanting to know actually how much it holds. What we want to know is that it holds more than the litre minimum we want. So there we are, look. We've got 1.5 litres. Oh! See, real life filming, real life screw-ups, cock-ups, whatever you want to call them. So anyway, we know the volume of our cardboard is fine, so we can set to now. And what we're going to do is remake a couple of these because they got wet and start to cut our alloy. But first of all, I've got to make a couple of marks on here for the air filter, so let's do that. Last thing I want before I cut the alloy is to get this cut out for the air filter. Now I actually made this tank a little taller to get a bit more volume in. So what we're going to have to do is put that there like that. Because if you don't have another tank to work from, as I didn't when I made this first one, you're going to have to do all this either by measurement or trial and error. So let's get this thing level down there. Actually, it's not much taller. And just mark ourselves a piece like that. Or I should say a piece like that where you can actually see it. So it's similar to this. We actually here isn't so much this size of the filter, it's more that, well, you can see where it goes on anyway, and it squishes a bit. So exactitude is not required, but if we cut a piece out there like that, that will be fine. That will do our piece there. And then of course we are going to need a matching piece there. So we need to know we're going to have a piece. Come back there like that. So I'm going to transfer all of this onto some alloy. I won't show you cutting out the alloy. You've seen me cut alloy. Everybody knows how to cut the sheet. And then we'll come back when we're starting to form up the pieces and do the welding. And we have a hole to cut here for this piece. And this tube here actually, I'm hoping you can see it because I'm not behind the camera, is the same size as we use inside the silencer. So we just have to cut a piece for that. And then we're going to turn the top, and we have to make the little mountings, which are interesting. So I'll show you all of those in a moment. Now I've cut out some of the pieces in alloy. I've cut out two sides, which, as I say, are identical, so they were easy to do. And what I've done is I cut out the top, the front and the bottom in one piece, because that'll be easy to fold and I can fit that in. Now there's our hole for the air filter when that's bent up, and I've cut a 1.5 inch hole in for the filler cap. Now some of you may be lucky enough to have one of those brake box things or a press that you can make up a little bender with some angle iron, but I know all of you have got a couple of G clamps and a piece of flat bar. For the Americans watching, they would call this a C clamp. In the UK we call it a G clamp because it's got the tail just like a capital G. So you also need a nice big rubber hammer. You know, I've had comments about bending it up this way, but as I say, I know everybody's got these bits and pieces, so we know everybody can do this. And you may have noticed I wrote inside on that because I have certainly bent things up and then found that I bent them the wrong way. Doesn't matter if they're symmetrical, but if it's something that's not symmetrical, then you go to fit it and suddenly you find out it's inside out. So here we go. Make sure we're on our mark. And again, of course, if you're doing this exactly and you've already made your measurements and fittings, you've got to take into account the thickness of the metal for the radius of the bend and all the rest of it. But we are making this as a one-off, so it doesn't have to be that exact, and we're not making the brackets until we finish the tank, so we don't have any holes really that need to line up. So here goes. Starting off. Moved a little bit. Just tighten our clamps up. Budget engineering. There's one side done. Now here, of course, we've got to be careful because at one point the metal we're bending is very thin. But we're going to be doing some welding there, so to be honest, if we get a crack or whatever on that, we can put it right. What I will do here actually is a little bit take into account the thickness, because we have the sides to match up. Get slightly technical there, and I know you don't expect that of me, so here we go. Now I don't know if any of you went to Charlie Prescott's Otter BSA website, where he's very kindly got a page following these videos, but his comments I take to heart, because Charlie has built a lot of frames over a lot of years, and he uses his real name. I don't like anonymous people particularly, but anyway, he mentioned when I was building the silencer that I could have annealed the alloy and made it easy to bend. And then I think I had a comment, someone asking me about annealing it, because or I might have read it in another thread, their attempt at annealing had always ended in disaster. Well, that, to be honest, is why I don't bother annealing it. I can manage with it being slightly stiff. So there's that. But yes, you can anneal aluminium. You've got to mess around with smoky flames and all sorts of things. So the next thing is we're going to tack all this together. Now you'll see here that, as I mentioned, we've got all sorts of strange angles. So what I'm going to have to do with the sides is put a very slight corner to corner bend in it to get it to fit down. So we'll do that, and then we'll clamp all this together, tack it up. There's our slot for the air filter to go through, and there's our hole for the filler cap. We'll drill 3 holes in the bottom of here later on. As I say, we're actually fitting this one off, so if brackets are slightly out, we can cope with that. So I haven't drilled anything on the bottom here until I've got the sides on and I can fit it into the frame, and then I can mark where the bottom mounting is going to be, and also mark where I'm going to put the 2 tubes. This one will be the feed to the engine, and this one here will be the return, which we'll make come up there so you can look in and see the oil returning. I like to see the oil returning, and that's one of the reasons why I always use clear hose. I know black herringbone rubber is the standard for British bikes, but 4 strokes, I like to know that the oil is going where it should be. So there we are with that. We're going to very slightly put a corner to corner bend to bring that corner in there, or that corner in there, whichever you prefer. So here's our box taking shape. So I've put a bend in this from corner to corner, so it now fits up nicely into there. Now I'm going to weld this on the inside, because really I should have thought of it beforehand, but when I made my measurements to fit into there, into the frame, of course I made this the full width. If I weld that on the outside, 1/16 of an inch each side, this is going to be an 1/8 of an inch wider, and it actually won't fit in. But it will go in there nicely, so we're going to weld that in there. I've done the edges of both sides with a stainless steel wire brush, which is all I only ever use it for aluminium to get the oxide off, and I'm going to give it a wipe down with acetone so there's no grease on it. Now, if you use acetone, I will mention something. Acetone is incredibly volatile. In the laboratories there would always be acetone wash bottles that we would use for drying glassware. You'd wash the glassware, then you'd squirt acetone in, shake it about, it absorbs the water, and then you could just blow dry it. Well, I was in the lab one day and I saw a dish of acetone and a burner, and it must have flashed about 8 feet through the air and set that alight. Also, somewhat apocryphal story, when I worked in bulk chemical storage in the tank farm, we were using a diesel pump to empty the dregs out of an acetone shore tank, and the door was off and the fumes worked their way around to the diesel pump, and that pump just started to go faster and faster and faster until it went bang. So don't have your acetone stood right next to where you're going to weld, or anything else with a naked flame. It's far worse than paint thinners or reducers, as they call it here in the States. So let me give this a quick wash off, and then we'll start tacking this in place. Because the minute you've, or the second even that you've finished brushing this, it'll start to form oxide again. But it's going to be such a negligible amount. Take the cloth away even. Now we come to that horrible bit in welding, unless you've got a multi-$1,000 welding table, where you've actually got to get it to stay in place while you weld it. Just got slightly out there. Take my hat off for this, so anything could happen. Because I put that down right on the welding rod. you dipstick. Forgot to turn the argon on, so we made a bit of a mess of this corner, but we can remake it and it'll look fine when we're finished. Now we'll tack the other side in. So that everything is in the rigid box shape and the heat doesn't make things distort too much. It's really hot. Very quickly. So now I've got it all tacked together, I'll go ahead and finish welding up, and then we'll make the pieces for here and here. The reason I haven't made them at the moment is, so we've got all these curves and weird shapes. You'd have to be pretty good to make that piece in one go. So what we're going to do, excuse my back again, is just stick a piece of card in and mark it up. And I've left it this late because it's a lot easier to do it with a nice firm piece than with the original cardboard mock-up. So let me weld this up and then we'll make that piece for in there and that curved piece for there, and we'll tidy this up a little also. And then we can set to put the neck in and start making mountings.